Everyday life and popular culture in the 1950s. Do you remember the feeling when the first black and white TVs started appearing in every cozy family home? Or when the passionate rock and roll tunes rocked the radio waves, making a whole generation dance along? And the dream of a cute little house in the suburbs with a lush green garden suddenly became more tangible than ever? After the tumultuous years of World War II, the United States entered a new era, an era of prosperity, innovation, and the traditional values that shaped a generation. Today, we'll join you in exploring what created that colorful picture, from the most familiar things to the trends that changed society as a whole. Let's reminisce about those sweet memories and discover why the 50s will forever be a memorable chapter in American history. Shall we? Post-war prosperity and family life. Do you remember the years right after the war? It was a period where hope seemed to fill every street and a sense of optimism spread across America. The 1950s wasn't just a decade, it was the dawn of the golden age of American capitalism. The economy boomed incredibly, with the gross national product, GNP, more than doubling from $200 billion in 1945 to over $500 billion in 1960. Can you feel that air of prosperity in every breath of daily life? Wages rose steadily, allowing families more money to spend than ever before. The average annual salary increased from $3,210 at the beginning of the decade to $5,010 by 1959. Just think, a factory job could pay around $1.50 per hour, while the minimum wage was 75 cents per hour. Unemployment and inflation rates were both low, creating a solid foundation for the growth of the middle class. This meant more families could afford conveniences, turning long-held aspirations into reality. And within that prosperous landscape, the nuclear family became the symbol of the American dream. An average family typically consisted of a father, mother, and a few children, building a life together. The average marrying age was quite young, around 23 for men and 20 for women. People often said, back then, people stuck together more. And indeed, only about 20 to 25% of marriages ended in divorce. Does that image feel familiar to you? Within the family, gender roles were typically very traditional. The husband was usually the breadwinner, working outside the home, while the wife stayed home to care for the family, raise the children, and manage household chores. Books and magazines of the era often encouraged women to focus on their roles as wives and mothers. While this was considered traditional and common, we must also acknowledge that it caused dissatisfaction for some women who yearned for a more meaningful life, a career of their own. What do you think about that? But despite these defined roles, family cohesion remained central to 1950s life. Families didn't just share a home, they were a close-knit unit, eating together, going out, and doing daily activities. Dinner wasn't just about refueling, it was a time to share, chat, and connect after a long day. And speaking of children, child rearing was particularly emphasized by 1950s parents. They played a very active role in their children's lives, not only nurturing and caring, but also guiding them as they grew up, and disciplining when necessary. Do you remember Dr. Benjamin Spock's book, The Common Sense Book of Baby and Child Care? This book became a guide for millions of parents, advising them to trust their instincts and, more importantly, to treat their children as independent individuals. Quite a progressive mindset for that era, wasn't it? So, in the context of the 1950s family, what do you think was the most core value passed down from generation to generation? The rise of suburbia. The American dream takes shape. Do you remember the feeling of wanting to escape the noise and crowds of the city to find a more spacious living environment, a more peaceful life? After World War II, a massive wave of migration occurred as millions of Americans began flocking to the airy suburban neighborhoods. This wasn't just a geographical shift, it was the formation of a new American dream. housing development boomed, with developers like William Levitt pioneering the purchase of suburban land and using mass production techniques to build rows of small, affordable homes. You might have heard of the famous Levitt towns, housing developments with thousands of identical homes, sprouting up like mushrooms after the rain. It was a feat of construction engineering and a symbol of the uniformity and convenience many craved. To support this wave, the GI Bill played an extremely important role. This act subsidized low-cost mortgage loans for many veterans, often making suburban homeownership much cheaper than renting an apartment in the city. As you can see, this policy helped millions of families have the opportunity to own their first home. However, it's also important to acknowledge that the application of this act was not uniform, leading to growing disparities in wealth, education, and civil rights between white and non-white individuals. This is a historical aspect that needs to be remembered. Suburban life was described as an ideal life. Suburban homes often had intimate family rooms, open spaces, and spacious backyards, ideal for young families. Nicknames like Fertile Valley or Rabbit Hutch spoke to the rapid growth of these communities. Backyard living became extremely popular, considered an outdoor living room where families could host barbecues, children could play, and adults could relax. It became a new symbol of the American dream. A white picket fence home, a green garden, and a peaceful life. Even the cost of building private swimming pools became more affordable after the war thanks to surplus materials. Did you often play in the backyard with friends, or have any unforgettable summer evenings there? Let us know in the comments. Entertainment transforms, the golden age of television. You might remember a magic box gradually appearing in your family's living room, completely changing the way we entertained ourselves, right? That was television, the new star of the 1950s. At the beginning of the decade, only about 9% of American households owned a TV, a rather modest number. But by 1959, this number had soared to 90%, an astonishing boom, wasn't it? By 1950, 4.4 million American families had TVs in their homes. The black and white TV became an indispensable part of daily life, a new member of the family. Watching TV shows in the evening became an indispensable family entertainment activity. The whole family would gather together, laughing and eagerly following the stories unfolding on screen. Do you remember evenings like that? Many shows became legendary. Family sitcoms were an extremely popular genre, and the most famous show of the decade, without a doubt, was I Love Lucy. Lucy Ricardo and Ricky Ricardo brought millions of laughs to audiences across America. Besides that, other shows like Leave It to Beaver, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, Father Knows Best, and The Honeymooners were also familiar names, truly reflecting American family life at the time. Beyond comedies, adult entertainment was also very diverse. You might have spent weekend evenings following the suspense of Alfred Hitchcock Presents or the thrilling cases of Perry Mason. And certainly, no one could forget the spectacular performances on The Ed Sullivan Show or the charm of The Lawrence Welk Show, The Milton Berle Show, and The Jack Benny Program. These shows introduced a host of new talents and trends to the public. And for children, the world of cartoons and adventures also blossomed on the small screen. Did you grow up with Captain Kangaroo, Howdy Doody, or as a member of the Mickey Mouse Club with its cheerful tunes? And The Adventures of Superman surely made many boys dream of flying through the sky, right? Right? Another genre that was extremely popular, especially with middle-aged men, was westerns. Stories of cowboys, gunfights, and the spirit of justice captivated audiences. Shows like Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, Wagon Train, Maverick, The Lone Ranger, and Have Gun Will Travel became must-watch names every week. The cinema experience and unique trends. Before TV dominated every household, and even as it became popular, Americans still held a special love for cinema. Going to the movies wasn't just an entertainment activity, it was also a social experience, a way to escape into imaginary worlds. At the beginning of the decade, a trend swept through movie theaters: 3D films. Do you remember the feeling of having to wear special cardboard and plastic glasses to see images pop out on screen? It was a new and incredibly exciting experience, even if it was a short-lived fad, peaking from 1952 to 1954. It brought an unprecedented cinematic feel. And in the latter half of the decade, another unique form of movie watching boomed: drive-in theaters. Imagine you're sitting in your car, parked in a large lot, looking up at a giant screen, and the sound comes through a small speaker clipped to your car window. It wasn't just watching a movie, it was a romantic date, a memorable family evening. Do you have any drive-in memories? The 1950s big screen also produced classic film stars and works that captivated millions of hearts. You might have been impressed by Charlton Heston as the majestic Moses in The Ten Commandments. This film not only became the highest-grossing film of the decade, but also received 7 Oscar nominations. Heston also continued to make waves with Ben-Hur, another epic film. Alfred Hitchcock's thriller films left audiences holding their breath. He delighted viewers with works like Vertigo and Rear Window, films that still haunt us today. And how can we forget the Hollywood icons who became legends? Marilyn Monroe, with The 7-Year Itch and Some Like It Hot, became a household name, an icon of beauty and glamour. James Dean, with his rebellious and captivating looks, became one of the decade's heartthrobs, with roles in Giant, East of Eden, and Rebel Without a Cause. Marlon Brando also made a huge splash with his intense, introspective roles in A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront. Audrey Hepburn and Elizabeth Taylor also captivated American audiences with their talent and beauty. Even animated films had a golden decade. Lady and the Tramp, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Peter Pan were among the highest-grossing animated films of the decade, bringing fairy tales and joy to children and adults alike. Do you remember those family TV nights or trips to the drive-in? Which show or movie was your must-see back then? Share your memories. The music revolution, tunes that shaped a generation. Do you remember the melodies that changed the world? The songs that made teenagers back then unable to stand still? Of course, we're talking about the birth of rock and roll. This wasn't just a new musical style. It was a cultural revolution, hugely popular with teenagers. Rock and roll paved the way for rockabilly music from talented artists like Jerry Lee Lewis and Johnny Cash. And from that revolution, legendary music icons emerged, names that are still mentioned with admiration today. Elvis Presley, none other than the king of rock and roll, had 12 #1 hits in this decade. Alongside Elvis, Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, and Jerry Lee Lewis became shining stars, shaping the sound of a generation. But the 50s wasn't just about rock and roll. It was also a diverse musical landscape. Singers like Frank Sinatra, with his warm and emotional voice, solidified his reputation with classic concept albums like In the Wee Small Hours, 1955, and Frank Sinatra Sings for Only the Lonely, 1958. Rosemary Clooney, Dean Martin, and Eddie Fisher were also beloved names, bringing smooth, romantic melodies. In the world of country music, Hank Williams, Patsy Cline, Gene Autry, and Chet Atkins were also very famous, bringing everyday stories and rustic, relatable melodies. And how can we forget the TV show, American Bandstand? This show was incredibly successful in introducing many new rock and roll artists to American audiences for the first time, becoming a bridge between music and millions of homes. Additionally, the 50s saw the rise of the LP vinyl record, replacing shorter 78 shellac records. Ampex's first 8-track recorder, launched in 1955, significantly enhanced technical capabilities and revolutionized record-making, opening new horizons for the music industry. Defining fashion styles of the decade. If you lived through the 50s, you'll surely remember one thing. It was a decade where fashion wasn't just about clothes. It was a statement of elegance, femininity, and a touch of subtle rebellion. After World War II, Paris regained its status as the international fashion capital, largely thanks to its glorious recovery, and especially to Christian Dior's The New Look. This was truly the golden age of Parisian fashion. Speaking of women's fashion, we can't not mention The New Look. Christian Dior launched this collection in 1947, featuring jackets cinched gracefully at the waist and full skirts extending below the knee. This design caused a sensation, particularly because it used nearly 20 meters of fabric for one dress, an unprecedented luxury after wartime material scarcity. It redefined femininity and elegance. Gowns of that era often reached the floor, with crinolines creating fullness, giving a noble and elegant look. Floor-length full skirts with crinolines also created a feminine, charming appearance. Shirtwaist dresses, fitted at the waist, made from shirting fabric and featuring a belt, were also very popular, offering practicality while remaining elegant. However, women also began wearing pants more comfortably and freely. From wide-legged pants to capris or short shorts, these once taboo garments now became part of the wardrobe. Shorts typically reached the knee, capris the calf. High-waisted pants, vibrant patterns, and bright colors were popular items. After the monochromatic colors of the 40s, printed patterns like stripes, florals, and polka dots made a strong comeback, bringing cheerfulness and vibrancy. And certainly, we can't forget the poodle motif on full skirts, which became an unmistakable fashion icon of the 50s. Accessories also played a crucial role. Let's recall the accessories that defined the characteristic style of that era. Gloves. Do you remember how ladies of that era always wore gloves as an indispensable part of elegance and sophistication? Those elbow-length gloves were often paired with evening wear or elegant outfits, enhancing a noble and refined look. Meanwhile, short gloves were the perfect choice to go with business suits or everyday attire, creating a neat and polished appearance. More than just a warming item, gloves were a symbol of class and the demeanor of a true lady of that time, carrying their own unique charm. Hats. For women, hats weren't just sun protection. They were also a symbol of grace and modesty. Those neat, small hats, often adorned with veils, added a touch of mystery and allure to women. With popular pastel colors, they created a soft, feminine feel, much favored. Remember watching old movies? Ladies always wore hats as an integral part of their outfits, enhancing elegance and completing the overall look. Hats were a subtle style statement, reflecting the care women took in their appearance back then. Glasses. Do you remember which glasses style was all the rage? That was cat-eye sunglasses. With their pointed edges and colorful frames, this style quickly became a chic icon, expressing the individuality and trendiness of American women. The image of a young woman wearing cat-eye glasses, driving to a drive-in movie, must surely be etched in many people's memories. They weren't just eyewear. They were a declaration of confidence and bold style, an impressive accent on ladies' faces. Jewelry. To complete the look, jewelry also played an important role. Pearls, whether real or fake, were always a top choice, becoming an iconic necklace type for elegance and luxury. Additionally, plastic beads were very popular, offering diverse, cheerful, and versatile jewelry pieces. Do you remember those brightly colored plastic bead necklaces? They were a great way to add a touch of personality to everyday outfits without being too elaborate. Whether it was elegant pearls or vibrant plastic beads, 50s jewelry always knew how to tell the story of the woman wearing it. Hula hoop. Ah, here it is. Speaking of the 50s, how can we forget the hula hoop? This toy created a massive craze when it launched in 1958. The amazing thing is that 25 million hoops were sold in just the first 4 months. It wasn't just a toy. It was an indispensable part of popular culture, bringing joy and activity to both children and adults of that era. The whole neighborhood competed to hula. Laughter echoed everywhere, becoming a symbol of carefree optimism and simple fun. Bobby socks. For young girls, short white socks, bobby socks, were an indispensable accessory. They were often paired with knee-length full skirts, poodle skirts, a very distinctive style of this decade. This style created a cute, energetic look and was a symbol of youth in this decade. Do you remember those pristine white bobby socks worn with loafers? They were a characteristic image of teenage girls, offering a youthful, comfortable yet very fashionable look. It was an inseparable part of school fashion at the time, a sweet and carefree touch of adolescence. These accessories weren't just items. They also depicted a part of the atmosphere, spirit, and lifestyle of Americans in the 1950s, a period full of memorable changes and recollections. For men's fashion, the 50s brought a distinguished, elegant, and sophisticated style. Dominant colors were black, white, and gray, but also combined with bright, fresh colors like red, blue, and yellow. Main materials included wool, velvet, leather, parachute fabric, and silk. Typical garments included vests, trench coats, dress pants, and Oxford shoes. Collarless shirts were essential, paired with dress pants or trousers and Oxford shoes. Pleated dress pants were also a characteristic trend, offering elegance and comfort. Knit polo shirts provided comfort for summer days. Leather jackets exuded a distinguished and luxurious look. Sporty jackets like bomber jackets were also very popular. Regarding men's accessories, the fedora was an indispensable item, creating an elegant and casual style. Flat penny loafers were a classic and beloved shoe style. The 1950s fashion left a significant mark and continues to influence modern men's and women's fashion. Do you see any designs today that are still inspired by the classic beauty of this decade? The rise of fast food culture. Do you remember the days when eating wasn't just about savoring a meal, but also an experience of speed and convenience? The 1950s was the birthplace of fast food culture as we know it today. The concept of fast food emerged to meet the needs of a large number of busy commuters, travelers, and workers who didn't have time to wait for traditional meals. This type of food was mass-produced, with the top priority being speed of service. Drive-through. Restaurants first became popular in the United States in the 1950s, allowing you to get your meal without leaving your car, and the term fast food was recognized by Merriam-Webster Dictionary in 1951, officially solidifying a new cultural phenomenon. Let's remember the pioneering restaurant chains that shaped this industry. White Castle. Born in 1921, White Castle is considered the first hamburger chain. They sold hamburgers for just 5 cents each. At its peak in the 1950s, White Castle had over 230 locations nationwide, with bright, white, fortress-like buildings and stainless steel counters. Do you remember the aroma of those hot, square mini burgers with chopped onions and melted cheese? Burger Chef. Founded in 1954 in Indianapolis, Burger Chef introduced the Triple Threat, the nation's first combo meal, for just 45 cents for a burger, fries, and a drink. By 1973, Burger Chef proudly stood as one of America's largest fast food empires, with over 1,000 locations. Their Big Chef and Super Chef burgers kept customers coming back for more. Sambo's. Launched in 1957, Sambo's specialized in pancakes and burgers, becoming a familiar breakfast spot. Although their name and murals later caused controversy regarding racial issues, in the 50s they attracted families with affordable meals and a cozy atmosphere. Geno's Hamburgers. Founded in 1957 by Baltimore Colts football legends Gino Marchetti and Alan Ameche. Gino's was famous for its massive Gino Giant burger and partnered with KFC, offering both burgers and fried chicken in one location. Do you remember the taste of those giant burgers? Lum's. Founded in 1956, Lum's was famous for its unique beer-steamed hot dogs, a flavor you'd be hard-pressed to find anywhere else. By the early 70s, Lum's had over 400 locations, even buying Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. Henry's Hamburgers. Starting in 1954, Henry's was known for selling cheeseburgers for just 15 cents and their famous brown bag special, a convenient combo meal with a double cheeseburger, fries, and soda. By the early 60s, they had over 200 locations, a favorite spot for families and teens. Puppin Taco, launched in 1956 in California, a daring place that combined hot dogs and tacos under one roof. Their quirky but appealing menu also featured burgers, pastrami sandwiches, and even slushies. Fun facts: the first family steakhouse opened in 1958, offering delicious steaks at affordable prices. Popular fast food items back then included hamburgers, French fries, onion rings, chicken nuggets, tacos, pizza, hot dogs, and ice cream. They changed the way Americans ate forever. Sports, endless passion. If you grew up in the 50s, you'd know that Americans' passion for sports was endless, and this decade brought memorable moments and unforgettable legends. Baseball, Major League Baseball, still held its place as the national pastime. Over 15 million tickets were sold almost every year during the decade. Audiences witnessed some of the greatest players of all time, like Yogi Berra, Stan Musial, Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle, and Ernie Banks. Do you remember any of their plays? Football, National Football League, also produced many notable players such as Raymond Berry, Otto Graham, Bobby Lane, Frank Gifford, Lou Groza, Dick Night Train Lane, and Jim Brown. In college football, Coach Bud Wilkinson and the University of Oklahoma impressed the nation with a 47-game winning streak and 3 national championships. These games became hot topics of conversation every week. Boxing was one of the most popular sports in America, attracting millions of spectators. Sugar Ray Robinson and Jake LaMotta were both famous boxers, with classic matches. And how can we forget Rocky Marciano, the heavyweight champion from September 1952 to April 1956. He was a symbol of strength and willpower. The nascent National Basketball Association, NBA, also produced memorable players, with Neil Johnston, Dolph Schayes, Bob Pettit, and George Mikan being some famous players, laying the groundwork for the great league it is today. Were you a fan of any particular sport in the 50s? Was there a team or player you idolized? Other popular cultural trends. Beyond major areas like entertainment, fashion, and food, the 1950s also saw countless smaller but no less memorable trends that shaped daily life and popular culture. Do you remember those coonskin caps? Boys back then wore them to emulate Davy Crockett, a popular TV show that was a huge hit. This cap wasn't just a toy, it was also a symbol of adventure and the spirit of freedom. And for girls, poodle skirts and bobby socks became an unmistakable style. Knee-length full skirts with adorable poodle images and short white socks created a youthful, energetic, and very feminine look. A toy that took the world by storm was the hula hoop. Launched in 1958, and astonishingly, 25 million were sold in the first 4 months. It wasn't just a toy. It was a simple but incredibly captivating form of entertainment that both children and adults wanted to try. Besides entertainment trends, the 1950s also marked the beginning of the modern scientific technological revolution. Although primarily impacting global industry and society, it also indirectly affected human life through new products and technologies, such as the development of television that we've discussed. The 1950s was truly a unique era. It wasn't just a symphony of economic prosperity and social innovation. It was also a solid foundation for traditional values, for family and community life. From family dinners gathered around the first TV, to rock and roll tunes that rocked the world, this was a decade that laid the groundwork for so much of what we see today. Memories of the 50s might not be exactly the same for everyone, but these widespread trends shaped a significant part of America. We've looked back together at a time where simplicity blended with remarkable advancements, where life might have been slower but also full of memorable moments. Illegal now, but normal in 1950s. Many things that our grandparents and parents once considered commonplace in their daily lives back in the 1950s would make us raise an eyebrow in surprise, or even be shocked today. Especially for those who lived or grew up in the 1950s, these memories can be very vivid. Perhaps you experienced some of the things on this list, or saw others doing them. And perhaps you'll ask yourself, wait, really? I thought that was perfectly normal back then. Let's take a trip down memory lane together and see what surprises you the most. Sex-segregated job ads. Remember those old newspapers? If you went back to the 1950s and flipped to the Help Wanted section, you'd see a scene very different from today. Job listings were divided into two separate columns, one for men wanted and one for women wanted. This wasn't just for convenience. It deeply reflected the ingrained gender stereotypes of the time. Looking at the men wanted column, you'd find jobs considered important and requiring qualities society then assigned to men. These included positions like business managers, engineers, and technicians. These jobs often demanded strength or intellect, according to old notions, requiring extensive travel or heavy lifting. More importantly, they typically came with much higher salaries, clear paths for advancement, and were seen as the roles for the family and societal pillars. And what about the women wanted column? It was filled with traditional service-oriented jobs. You'd see teachers, usually in lower grades, office workers like secretaries and typists, or nurses in supporting roles. There were even jobs related to homemaking, like department store clerks or domestic helpers. These ads often emphasized dexterity and meticulousness, or the ability to work under direction, not leadership or decision-making skills. Try to imagine a young woman in the 1950s who dreamed of becoming an engineer or a manager. She would face immense difficulties. She wouldn't find any job listings for those positions in the Women Wanted column. And if she tried applying for jobs in the Men Wanted column, she'd likely be rejected right from the interview stage. This clear division created an invisible yet incredibly strong wall, severely limiting the career paths of millions of women. Why was such obvious inequality widely accepted? Simply put, because it was the common reality of that era. It didn't just reflect, but also reinforce the traditional gender roles society had defaulted to. Men were expected to be the primary breadwinners, the pillars. Women were primarily focused on family, childcare, and doing jobs considered lighter or supportive. Most people at the time believed this was how things should be. Companies and employers simply followed the existing social norms without realizing they were contributing to structural inequality. Today, blatantly discriminatory job advertising like that is forbidden and considered illegal. We've recognized that classifying and restricting opportunities based on gender created a massive structural barrier for women. This not only prevented them from accessing high-paying careers or leadership positions, but also limited the overall development of society. A giant legal turning point occurred in 1964 with the introduction of the Civil Rights Act in the United States. This landmark legislation officially prohibited discrimination in employment based on many factors, including sex. This legally ended the practice of dividing job ads by gender, opening up significantly broader opportunities for women in all areas of life. Littering. You might find it hard to believe, But littering was once a fairly common and widely accepted social behavior in the 1950s. This doesn't mean everyone did it, but the general attitude towards public cleanliness was very different from today. Public trash cans were few or even non-existent in many places. The focus on systematic waste disposal or individual environmental responsibility was almost non-existent in community consciousness. Therefore, it was common for people to throw candy wrappers, empty bottles, snack packaging, or cigarette butts right on the street, in parks, or toss them out of car windows while driving on the highway. Think back to the image of picnics or public areas after a large gathering. The scene of scattered trash might make us shake our heads in dismay today. There were many reasons why this was normal. On one hand, it was a period of strong consumer culture development, leading to a significant increase in single-use packaged products. Unlike earlier times when packaging was reused or made from biodegradable materials, the 1950s saw a boom in plastic and other synthetic materials. On the other hand, there was a serious lack of awareness about the environmental impact of waste. Concepts like environmental pollution, the harm of plastic waste to ecosystems, or the importance of recycling were very vague or completely foreign to the vast majority of people. Throwing something away was seen simply as making it disappear from sight without considering the long-term consequences. Fortunately, this attitude has changed significantly. Thanks to strong environmental campaigns, like the famous Keep America Beautiful campaign featuring the Crying Indian, public attitudes gradually shifted. People began to become more aware of the importance of protecting our shared living environment. Alongside this, laws and social norms today discourage littering behavior. Many cities and states have enacted laws prohibiting public littering and imposing significant fines on violators. Environmental education programs in schools and communities also helped shape the consciousness of new generations. Waste collection and recycling systems have been invested in and developed more widely. Recalling the image of streets and parks from back then and comparing them to the cleaner, hopefully present day, we can clearly feel the change in collective consciousness. From neglecting the environment, we have gradually learned to appreciate and be more responsible for our shared living space. Hitchhiking. In the 1950s, hitchhiking wasn't just a way to travel, it was a part of American road culture. It was considered a common and widely accepted means of transportation. You could often see people standing by the road, thumb out, hoping to catch a ride. Those hitchhiking were diverse, from young people on adventurous journeys, military personnel on leave, to simply those who didn't own a car in an era when cars weren't truly common for every family. It was seen as economical, completely free, and sometimes necessary, especially in rural areas or small towns where public transportation was limited or non-existent. Trust in strangers in society at that time seemed higher. Fewer people viewed giving or asking for rides as dangerous. It was a generous act, helping each other out on the road. Stories of adventurous hitchhiking trips and interesting encounters on the road became part of popular culture. This practice became normal and widespread, mainly due to the economic conditions and transportation infrastructure of the time. Not everyone could afford a car. The public transportation network wasn't as developed as it is today. Gasoline was cheaper, and importantly, as mentioned, violent crime rates on the road were lower, making people feel safer interacting with strangers on the road. Today, hitchhiking has significantly declined, and in many places is illegal. The main reason is increased concern for personal safety and the rise in criminal cases related to hitchhikers or drivers giving rides. Stories of abductions, robberies, or assaults have shaken trust in strangers on the road. Society today is much more cautious. Parents don't encourage their children to hitchhike. Drivers are also hesitant to give rides to strangers for fear of risk to themselves. The development of ride-sharing apps and public transportation also makes hitchhiking no longer the necessary or most economical option. Of all the things we've discussed, which one surprises you the most? Share your memories, thoughts, or anything you want to say in the comments below. Exaggerated, misleading advertisements. Step into the world of 1950s advertising, and you'll find a market operating with minimal oversight. This was a time when the line between truth and flowery advertising claims was very blurry, or even non-existent. Companies could make bold, exaggerated statements about their products with little fear of being verified or penalized. You might remember images that are shocking today. Cigarette ads featuring doctors in white coats, endorsing a certain brand of cigarettes as good for the throat or less irritating. Unbelievable, right? Smoking was linked to health and medical authorities were promoting it. It wasn't just cigarettes. The market was flooded with other products promising dreamlike results. There were diet products guaranteeing effortless weight loss just by using their product. Soft drinks were advertised as being good for digestion or even helping with weight loss. Miracle pills claimed to cure all sorts of ailments. The marketing style was very aggressive, targeting a wide audience, including women with beauty, diet, and home products, and even children with cereals, toys, soft drinks. Ad copy often used absolute terms like best, only, completely cures, without needing actual scientific evidence. Why was there such freedom in advertising? The main reason was that regulatory agencies like the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, or the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, had very limited authority at the time. They didn't have enough laws, resources, or power to tightly control every advertising claim. Additionally, community awareness about health and skepticism towards advertising were not as high as today. Consumers tended to believe advertisements, especially when presented professionally or with, even fake, evidence from seemingly trustworthy figures. Today, the situation has changed completely. Community health awareness has significantly increased, especially after the harmful effects of smoking and other toxic substances were exposed. Consumers are more cautious of miracle advertising claims. This has led to the introduction and enforcement of much stricter regulations. Truth in advertising laws compel companies to prove the validity of product claims, particularly those regarding health or effectiveness. Misleading or deceptive advertising campaigns can face hefty fines. Furthermore, warning labels on products, like on cigarettes, food, chemicals, have become mandatory, providing important information and warning consumers about risks. Is there anything from the 1950s you remember that was once very normal but has now disappeared or is forbidden that I haven't mentioned? Child labor. Although child labor laws began to be enacted from the early 20th century, in reality, many children in the U.S. still participated in labor in the 1950s. This situation was particularly common in rural areas or in family businesses. Common jobs included delivering newspapers early in the morning or late afternoon, working on farms, harvesting crops, tending livestock, or doing odd jobs and chores in small family or community stores or factories, especially during summer vacation. While the sight of children working in large industrial factories like in the late 19th century was gone, it wasn't uncommon for children to spend a large portion of their time outside school hours earning money or helping their families. Children's participation in labor was often seen as a way to teach them responsibility, diligence, and the value of money. It was also a way for children to contribute additional income to the family, especially in disadvantaged families or in less developed economic areas. The line between helping the family in an age-appropriate way and child exploitation was not always clear in the social consciousness of the time. Many adults believed that working early would help children mature faster. Today, the concept of childhood and child development has changed significantly. There is much stricter enforcement of child labor laws. Regulations regarding minimum age, maximum working hours, and permitted types of jobs for minors are more strictly adhered to in most formal industries. There is much greater emphasis on education. Society values children being prioritized to attend school, learn, and play for comprehensive development, rather than having to bear financial responsibilities too early. Although violations or underground forms of child labor still exist, in terms of social and legal norms, child labor in formal industries has significantly decreased. Remembering the odd jobs you or your peers might have done in childhood, delivering papers, mowing lawns, grocery delivery, and reflecting on the difference in the perception of childhood and work today, it shows a shift in societal values, prioritizing children's right to learn, play, and develop. Stocking ipecac syrup at home. Going back to the 1950s and even 60s, here was a piece of advice many parents received from their esteemed pediatricians. Make sure you always had a bottle of ipecac syrup in the family medicine cabinet. Ipecac syrup is a strong emetic, meaning it makes you vomit. The idea behind this advice was simple. If your child accidentally swallowed something toxic, an adult's pill, cleaning chemicals, or anything dangerous left within reach but grabbed out of curiosity, you'd just give them a dose of ipecac. The hope was that the poison would be expelled through vomiting before the body could absorb it. In an era when knowledge about poison control was limited and specialized centers weren't common, having this quick fix readily available at home gave parents a sense of safety and control, albeit fragile, in terrifying emergencies. It was considered a necessary preventive measure, like having bandages or antiseptic. This practice was considered normal because it was recommended by medical professionals themselves at the time. Doctors believed that inducing vomiting as quickly as possible was the most effective way to remove poisons from the body. Based on the medical knowledge and experience of the 1950s, this was truly a measure considered standard and reliable. In-depth research on pharmacology and toxicology hadn't developed as much as it has today. However, time and science have changed how we view this issue. Later research showed that inducing vomiting wasn't always as effective as people once thought. In many cases, a significant portion of the poison could still be absorbed before the ipecac syrup took effect. More importantly, inducing vomiting could sometimes do more harm than good. For example, if a child swallowed corrosive chemicals, like acid or bleach, vomiting would cause that chemical to pass through the esophagus a second time, causing more severe damage. Inducing vomiting could also lead to the poison being inhaled into the lungs, which could be life-threatening. Today, modern poison control centers absolutely do not recommend using ipecac. Instead, the general advice is, immediately call the poison control center or take the child to the nearest medical facility. Experts will guide you on the most appropriate treatment for the specific type of poison, which might involve using activated charcoal to absorb toxins or other treatment methods that are much safer and more effective than trying to induce vomiting at home. Lobotomies. This might send shivers down many people's spines, but in the 1950s, lobotomy was considered a legitimate and sometimes widely practiced treatment for many mental health conditions. It was seen as a solution for illnesses ranging from severe depression and schizophrenia to unmanageable behavioral problems. Famous doctors like Walter Freeman widely promoted this procedure, performing it thousands of times, sometimes in public demonstrations. The procedure typically involved severing nerve connections in the frontal lobe of the brain, with the hope of reducing symptoms like anxiety, agitation, or delusions. Often, patients undergoing this procedure had little informed consent. In many cases, the decision was made by family members or guardians, sometimes not in the patient's best interest, but to control their abnormal behavior, making them more compliant and easier to manage in the context of overcrowded mental institutions. Lobotomy's acceptance was due to the very limited state of mental health care at the time. Other treatments like psychotherapy or tranquilizers were in their early stages or not widely available. Faced with severe mental illnesses and under-resourced mental hospitals, lobotomy was seen as a glimmer of hope, a last resort to help patients or at least their caregivers, cope with their condition. As mentioned, the procedure was often performed without full consent, and sometimes just to control behavior rather than cure the illness. Societal perception of mental illness was also very different. Patients were often stigmatized and confined, and making them less troublesome was sometimes prioritized over actual rehabilitation. Today, lobotomy is viewed as a dark and painful chapter in the history of psychiatry. We clearly recognize that this procedure often caused severe, irreversible side effects. Patients after lobotomy could experience severe cognitive decline, abrupt and permanent personality changes, loss of emotional expression, or become completely passive. With the tremendous advancements in psychiatry, the introduction of effective medications, and modern therapeutic methods, lobotomy is no longer an acceptable form of treatment. It is strongly condemned for its destructiveness, lack of true effectiveness in restoring mental health, and often severe violation of patient rights. Easy commitment to mental institutions. In the 1950s, the mental health care system was very rudimentary and differed profoundly from today. There was a sad reality that a family member could commit another relative to a mental institution or insane asylum relatively easily and often without strict legal oversight. In many cases, a statement from just one or two family members was enough for someone to be committed to a mental facility. This process often lacked independent medical evaluations, the right of the person being committed to be heard, and legal procedures protecting their rights. This was sometimes abused to control or remove individuals whose behavior was deemed different from social norms. In particular, women could be institutionalized for vague reasons like being too emotional, disobedient, having modern thoughts, or simply being troublesome to the family. The elderly or disabled could also be sent to these facilities without actually having a mental illness requiring treatment. This became common because facilities and laws regarding mental health were very limited. There were few psychiatrists and therapists. Effective treatment methods were not widely available. Besides that, the social perception of mental illness was very negative. Patients were often considered crazy, dangerous, or incurable. Committing them to a mental institution was seen as the only way to protect society or simply solve the problem for the family. The consequences of the old system were severe. Mental facilities were often overcrowded, living conditions were poor, and patients had very few rights after being admitted. Many were locked up for years, even for life, without proper treatment or only receiving rudimentary sedation methods. They lost their freedom and the right to make decisions about their lives and health. Major reforms in mental health care starting from the late 20th century profoundly changed the situation. Patient rights movements, the development of modern psychiatry, and new laws have more tightly protected the rights of people with mental illness. Involuntary hospitalization today requires complex legal procedures, independent medical evaluations, and must be based on clear medical necessity, not social convenience or family wishes. There is a focus on outpatient treatment, community reintegration, and reducing stigma against people with mental illness. Widespread use of asbestos. In the 1950s, asbestos was the star of the building materials industry. It was hailed as a versatile, modern, and almost magical material. It was lightweight, durable, extremely heat-resistant, fireproof, good at sound insulation, and affordable. Sounds perfect, doesn't it? Because of these superior properties, asbestos was widely used in construction and manufacturing. It was present everywhere you could imagine, in insulation materials for walls, roofs, and pipes, in floor tiles, roofing materials, ceiling panels, in cement products, paints, and plaster, and even in old household appliances like hairdryers or irons. Construction workers had direct contact with asbestos daily when cutting, installing, or removing materials. Why did people use something so dangerous without hesitation? The reason is that the health risks associated with asbestos exposure were largely unknown or deliberately concealed by related industries at the time. Scientists might have had initial suspicions about the link between asbestos and lung diseases in miners, but this information was not widely publicized or was hidden or downplayed by the industries involved. Consumers and even many workers were unaware that the tiny asbestos fibers, when released from materials and floating in the air, could be inhaled into the lungs and stay there permanently, causing terrible consequences later. It took many decades later, when serious diseases began appearing at higher rates in people who had worked or lived in environments with asbestos, for the link to be clearly proven. Prolonged exposure to asbestos was later directly linked to extremely serious health problems, including mesothelioma, a rare and malignant cancer affecting the lining of the lungs or abdomen, lung cancer, asbestosis, a chronic disease causing breathing difficulties, and other lung diseases. Sadly, it took many years for regulations regarding asbestos use to be enacted and enforced. Although the use of asbestos in new materials is banned or very strictly limited in many countries today, the problem isn't over. Many old buildings constructed in the 1950s to 1970s still contain asbestos in insulation, flooring, ceilings, etc. Asbestos removal requires specialized handling by trained teams to ensure the fibers are not released into the environment and endanger others. Backyard trash burning. This was a very familiar sight in many neighborhoods, especially in rural or suburban areas in the 1950s. An old metal barrel or a small pit in the corner of the backyard where people burned household trash. Instead of systematic waste collection like today, many families simply gathered all household waste, old paper, packaging, food scraps, even plastic and household chemicals, and burned it. The characteristic smell of smoke from burning all sorts of materials often lingered in the evening or early morning air. This was a standard practice in personal waste management in many places. Burning trash at home was considered normal because there was very little understanding at the time about the environmental or health risks from burning synthetic materials, like plastic. People weren't aware that smoke from burning plastic and chemicals could contain toxic substances, causing air pollution and affecting human health and the surrounding environment. Public trash collection systems were not uniformly developed everywhere, especially in areas far from urban centers. Burning trash on site was seen as the easiest and most convenient way to get rid of waste, rather than storing it. Today, we know very well that smoke from burning household trash often carries toxic substances. Burning materials like plastic, rubber, or household chemicals creates toxic gases such as dioxins, furans, carbon monoxide, and fine particles causing serious air pollution. Inhaling these substances can cause health problems like respiratory irritation, asthma, and in the long term, can cause nerve damage, endocrine disruption, and increase the risk of cancer. Because of these risks, backyard trash burning is forbidden or strictly regulated in most residential areas today. Communities rely on centralized waste management systems, including regular trash collection, disposal at controlled landfills, or modern incinerators with exhaust filters, and recycling programs to reduce the amount of waste needing disposal. Cosmetics containing radiation. In an era when understanding of radiation was limited and beauty and health were valued, some manufacturers came up with strange ideas. They put radioactive ingredients like radium into cosmetic and health products. Hard to believe, isn't it? There were creams, powders, toothpaste, and even dietary supplements advertised as containing radium or other radioactive elements. They were promoted as scientifically advanced, revolutionary, and believed to be capable of rejuvenating the skin, removing wrinkles, boosting vitality, improving blood circulation, or even curing diseases. These products were often sold at high prices, targeting wealthy consumers eager for youth and health. The use of radioactive elements was seen as proof of the product's modernity and effectiveness. Why did people use such dangerous things? Simply because the health risks from radiation were very poorly understood or deliberately ignored by profit-driven manufacturers. Although cases of radiation poisoning had been recorded, like the female workers painting clock dials with radium paint who suffered severe poisoning, knowledge about the effects of low-dose or chronic radiation exposure was not widely disseminated. Belief in science and a lack of understanding about radiation made consumers easily trust false advertising claims. Today, we know very well that exposure to radioactive substances, even in small but prolonged doses, can cause extremely serious medical problems. The use of products containing radioactive substances led to radiation poisoning, cell damage, and increased risk of various cancers. As scientific knowledge about the harmful effects of radiation improved and became more widespread, these products containing radioactive substances were quickly removed from the market. Strict regulations were put in place to prevent the use of dangerous substances like radium in consumer products, especially cosmetics and dietary supplements. Agencies like the FDA today play an important role in controlling the ingredients of these products. Washing a child's mouth with soap as punishment. For many who grew up in the 1950s and even the 60s, 70s, this is a memorable or forgettable childhood memory. Washing a child's mouth with soap was a common form of punishment in many families when a child swore, lied, or used language considered improper. It was passed down through generations and seen as a strong way to teach children discipline and respect towards adults and language. The burning, bitter, unpleasant feeling of soap in the mouth was considered a direct and unforgettable lesson, making children think carefully before speaking inappropriate words. This was considered normal because it was a widely accepted parenting norm at the time. There weren't many studies on the psychological impact of punishments, and disciplinary methods often tended to rely on physical deterrence or causing discomfort. Parents who did this often believed they were doing what was best for their children, teaching them right from wrong in a way they themselves might have been taught. Today, the concept of parenting has changed significantly based on new understandings of child psychology and positive discipline methods. Washing a child's mouth with soap is gradually being eliminated as parenting standards evolve. The most important reason is that it poses a health risk. Soap, especially older types, could contain chemicals irritating to the mouth lining and digestive tract. If a child accidentally swallowed it, it could cause nausea, vomiting, or other digestive problems. For some, this might be a memory that's both funny, looking back from a different perspective, and bitter for those who experienced it. It shows a major shift in how society views parenting, from focusing on strict discipline to emphasizing safety, understanding, and positive communication. Do you have any special memories from this decade? Any stories about family, friends, or things you experienced that you'd like to share? Leave your stories, your fondest memories from the 1950s in the comments below. If you enjoyed this trip back in time and you want to continue exploring other decades with us, don't forget to hit subscribe to the WhoRemembers channel and share this video with your friends and family. We'll continue this nostalgic journey, rediscovering the pieces of memory that shaped our lives. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.